Clara Whitmore's knees hit the frozen platform before she could catch herself. 7 children. 7 hungry faces watching their mother fall. The rancher who'd sent for her, just her, stood 20 feet away, his expression unreadable as winter stone. She'd lied. God forgive her, she'd lied in every letter. And now Silas Burnett was counting heads. 1, 2, 3. All the way to 7. Clara waited for him to turn away. Everyone always did. If you want to see what happens next, subscribe to my channel and watch until the very end. Comment below with your city, so I can see how far this story travels. The train had been 3 days late. Clara counted those days in hunger pangs and children's tears. Counted them in the coins she'd spent on stale bread and watered milk. Counted them in the worried glances of strangers who saw a thin woman with 7 children and looked away fast. Now the locomotive screamed to a stop at Whisper Creek Station, and Clara's hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Mama." Ezra's voice came low. 10 years old and already trying to sound like a man. "Mama, you're scaring the little ones." Clara looked down at her hands, white-knuckled on the carpet bag. She forced them open. "I'm fine." "You ain't fine. You've been saying that for 3 weeks. Clara met her son's eyes. So much of his father in that stubborn jaw. But the eyes, those were hers. Watchful, waiting for the next blow. "I need you to help me," Clara said quietly. "When we step off this train, I need you to keep your brothers and sisters together. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Whatever happens, whatever he says, you keep them together and you keep them quiet." Ezra's face hardened. "He's gonna turn us away, ain't he?" It wasn't a question. Clara touched his cheek, just briefly. "I don't know what he's gonna do, but we're gonna face it standing up. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." The train doors opened. Cold wind rushed in, carrying the smell of snow and pine, and something else, something that smelled like the end of the line. Clara gathered her children. Nell clutched her rag doll with both hands. 7 years old and silent for most of the journey. She'd stopped talking much after. Clara didn't let herself finish that thought. The twins, Samuel and Solomon, pressed close to Ezra. 5 years old and identical in everything except the scar on Samuel's chin from a fall last winter. Little Jonah rode her hip, 4 years old and half asleep. Behind him, Ruth held baby Miriam, just 14 months and fussing with the cold. Ruth was 12, old enough to understand exactly how desperate this was. "Mama," Ruth's voice cracked. "What if—" "Hush now. We'll face what comes." They stepped onto the platform. The wind hit Clara like a fist. November in Montana. She'd known it would be cold, but this was something else. This was cold that meant business. Her eyes swept the platform. 3 men smoking near the station house. A woman in a fur-trimmed coat staring. An old man with a newspaper. And there, standing apart from everyone, Silas Burnett. Clara knew him from the photograph he'd sent. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair under a weathered hat. But the photograph hadn't captured the stillness of him. The way he stood like something rooted to the earth. He was watching her. No. He was counting. Clara saw his lips move, saw his eyes track from Ezra to Nell to the twins to Jonah to Ruth to baby Miriam. 7. She'd written that she had no children. She'd written that she was alone in the world. She'd written lies because the truth would have meant no one ever answered. And now the truth stood on a frozen platform in Montana, shivering and hungry and waiting for a stranger's mercy. Clara took 1 step forward, her knees buckled. 3 weeks of barely eating. 3 weeks of giving her portions to the children. 3 weeks of fear and hope and fear again. Her body simply quit. She went down hard, catching herself on one hand, the other arm wrapped tight around Jonah. The impact jarred through her bones. She heard Ruth cry out, heard Ezra shout, heard the twins start to wail. And she heard boots on wooden boards, coming closer. Clara looked up. Silas Burnett stood over her. His face was in shadow against the gray sky. She couldn't read his expression. Couldn't tell if he was angry or disgusted or simply done with her before they'd even spoken. "Please." The word scraped out of her throat. "Please, I can explain." "When did you last eat?" Clara blinked. "Ma'am." His voice was low, rough. Not cruel, but not warm either. "When did you last eat?" The children needed." "That ain't what I asked." Clara's mind went blank. She genuinely couldn't remember. 2 days ago, Silas muttered something under his breath. Then he turned to Ezra. "Boy, what's your name?" Ezra's chin came up. "Ezra Whitmore, sir, and you ain't gonna hurt my mama." Something flickered across Silas's face, too fast to read. "Wasn't planning on it." He crouched down, putting himself at Clara's level. "I'm gonna pick you up now. That all right with you?" "I can walk." "No, ma'am. You can't." Before Clara could protest, Silas had lifted her, one arm under her knees, the other around her back, like she weighed nothing, like she was something worth carrying. Jonah, still in Clara's arms, stared at Silas with huge eyes. "You're big," Jonah announced. "Reckon I am." "Are you a giant?" "Jonah!" Ruth's voice was sharp with fear. "Hush!" Silas glanced at Ruth, at the baby in her arms, at the terror on her young face. "It's all right," he said. "Boy can ask questions. That's what boys do." He looked at Ezra. "You gonna stand there, or you gonna help me get your family to the wagon?" Ezra didn't move. "Why? Why what? Why are you helping? She lied to you, about all of us. You could just—" "I know what I could do." Silas's voice hardened. "I'm asking what you're gonna do. Stand there in the cold or get your brothers and sisters to someplace warm." For a long moment, Ezra didn't move. Clara watched her son's face, watched him weigh this stranger, measure him against every man who'd ever let them down. Then Ezra nodded, once, sharp. "Samuel Solomon, stay with me. Nell, take Ruth's hand. We're going with him." "But Ezra," Ruth started. "We ain't got a choice, Ruth. Look at Mama." Ruth looked. Clara saw her daughter's face crumple with the understanding of how bad things really were. They moved as a group. Silas carried Clara like she was made of glass. The children clustered around him, a ragged flock following a shepherd they didn't trust. The platform had gone quiet. Clara felt eyes on them, heard whispers starting. A woman's voice, high and carrying, "7 children. Can you imagine?" A man's voice, lower. "Heard she was supposed to come alone. Poor Burnett." Another woman, "Poor Burnett. Nothing. Look at those children, skinny as rails." Clara closed her eyes. Let the shame wash over her. She'd spent so long running from judgment. Now here it was catching up. "Don't listen to them." Silas's voice was quiet, just for her. Clara opened her eyes. "They're right? I deceived you." "We'll talk about that later. Right now we're getting you fed." He settled her onto a wagon seat. Heavy blankets appeared. He wrapped one around her, another around the children, as they climbed into the back. Ruth sat with baby Miriam. Ezra lifted the twins in one by one. Nell scrambled up on her own, never letting go of her doll. Jonah refused to leave Clara's side. "He can sit up front," Silas said, "if that's all right." Clara nodded. She didn't trust her voice. Silas climbed onto the wagon seat, took the reins. Jonah pressed between them, small and warm. "Mister?" Jonah tugged at Silas's coat. "Are we going to your house?" "Yeah." "Is it warm?" "It's warm." "Do you have food?" "I have food." Jonah considered this. "I like food." Clara felt something crack in her chest, something that had been holding together by pure will. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do." Silas didn't answer right away. He clicked his tongue, and the horses began to move. The town fell behind them. Whisper Creek. Main Street with its general store, its boarding house, its white church steeple. People still watching, still whispering. Then they were on a road cutting through snow-covered land, mountains in the distance, endless sky. "Your husband," Silas said finally. "The letters said he died." That part was true. "How long ago?" "2 years. And you've been raising 7 children alone since then?" "Yes." "No family. No one to help." Clara thought about her father-in-law, the way he'd looked at her after the funeral, the way he'd said those children should be raised by proper folk. No one who wanted to help. Silas made a sound, not quite agreement, not quite understanding, just acknowledgement. They rode in silence. Jonah fell asleep against Clara's side. In the back of the wagon she could hear Ruth humming to the baby, hear the twins whispering to each other, hear Nell's silence like a presence of its own. Ezra hadn't taken his eyes off Silas. Clara noticed the house before Silas said anything. It stood against the mountain backdrop, 2 stories of solid timber. A wraparound porch. Windows, real glass windows, not oiled paper. A barn nearby, and beyond it she could make out horses in a corral. It was the biggest house she'd ever seen outside of a city. "This is yours." The words escaped before she could stop them. "Built it myself. Took 4 years. It's..." Clara didn't have words. She'd expected a cabin, a shack, something rough and small and barely standing. "It's beautiful." "It's empty." Silas pulled the wagon to a stop. "Been empty since I finished it." He climbed down and reached for Jonah. The boy woke blinking and confused, then settled into Silas's arms like he'd always belonged there. Clara's heart clenched. "Can you walk now?" Silas asked her. "I think so." She climbed down carefully. Her legs held, barely. Ruth handed baby Miriam to Ezra and jumped down to help the twins. Nell climbed out on her own, still silent, her eyes taking in everything. "Inside," Silas said. "All of you." They filed through the front door and into warmth. Clara stopped breathing. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, flames already crackling, a kitchen with a real stove, a table big enough for... "How many bedrooms?" she heard herself ask. 6. 6 bedrooms, for one man. Why? The question was out before she could stop it. Why would you build 6 bedrooms? Silas set Jonah down. The boy immediately began exploring, touching everything within reach. "Because I'm a fool," Silas said quietly. "Because I thought someday there'd be someone to fill them." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. "I'll make you a deal." Silas turned to face her fully. His eyes were gray in the firelight, serious, measuring. "You stay through winter. I won't send you out in this cold with 7 children. Come spring, if you want to leave, I'll give you enough money to get wherever you're going. And if I want to stay..." The question hung between them. Silas's jaw tightened. "Then we'll talk about that come spring." It wasn't an answer. It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance or anything close to what Clara had hoped for. But it wasn't rejection either. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet." Silas turned toward the kitchen. "I'm gonna make food. You're gonna sit down before you fall down again. And then you're gonna tell me the truth. All of it, starting from the beginning." Clara sank into a chair at the big empty table. Around her, her children spread out cautiously. Ruth found the stove and immediately began helping Silas with the food. Ezra stood by the door, still watching, still waiting for something to go wrong. The twins discovered a basket of wooden toys in the corner, carved horses and cows and tiny wagons. Jonah joined them, chattering excitedly. Nell sat beside Clara, still holding her doll, still silent. Clara put her arm around her daughter and watched this stranger move through his kitchen, feeding her family without being asked, warming them without being thanked. She didn't understand him, but for the first time in 2 years, she felt something she'd forgotten existed. Hope. Dangerous, fragile, probably foolish hope. She held on to it anyway. The children ate like they were afraid the food would disappear. Silas watched them work through biscuits and salt pork and beans. The little one Jonah had crumbs all over his face and didn't care. The twins ate in perfect synchronization, reaching for things at the same moment, chewing at the same pace. The silent girl Nell ate slowly, carefully, watching everyone else. The older girl Ruth had given up eating to feed the baby. Silas noticed she'd only had half a biscuit herself. "There's more," he said, sliding another plate toward her. "Ain't gonna run out." Ruth looked at him with eyes too old for her face. 12 years old, Clara had said. But those eyes had seen things, known things. "Thank you, sir." "Don't call me sir. Makes me feel like my father." "What should I call you?" Silas considered. "Silas is fine. Mama says we should be respectful to adults. Being honest is more respectful than being proper." Silas turned to Ezra. The boy had finished eating, but hadn't moved from his spot by the door. Still on guard, still waiting. "You can sit down. I ain't gonna bite." "I'm fine standing." "Suit yourself." Clara set down her fork. She'd eaten 3 bites, more than she could probably keep down, given how long she'd gone without. "You wanted the truth," she said. "I do. The children should hear it too." Silas's voice was firm. "They're part of this. They got a right to know what's happening." Clara looked at her children, at Ruth trying to be brave, at Ezra trying to be strong, at the little ones who didn't fully understand, but felt the fear anyway. "All right," she said. "The truth." She took a breath. "My husband was a miner. Coal, back in Pennsylvania. He wasn't a bad man, but he wasn't a good one either. He drank when he had money and worked when he didn't. I took in sewing laundry, whatever I could find. We survived." Silas said nothing, just listened. 3 years ago there was a cave-in. 40 men went down that morning. 4 came back up. My husband wasn't one of them. "I'm sorry." Clara shook her head. "Don't be. The truth is, I was relieved. Does that make me terrible? He was my children's father, and I was relieved when he died." "It makes you human." Clara looked at him sharply. She'd expected judgment. Everyone judged. "After he died, his mother came. She said I wasn't fit to raise her grandchildren. Said she'd take them. All of them. Said I could start over. Without them." Ruth made a small sound. Clara reached for her hand. "I told her no. I told her I'd die before I let her take my babies. She told me she'd see me in court." "Court," Silas repeated. "She had money. Her second husband had money. They had lawyers' connections, church people who'd testify I was unfit." Clara's voice cracked. "I didn't have anything. Just 7 children and a sewing needle." "So you ran." "I saw an advertisement. Mail-order brides wanted for the Western Territories. I wrote 20 letters, Silas. 20. Yours was the only one that wrote back. And you didn't tell me about the children because no one wants 7 children." Clara's eyes finally overflowed. "Because every letter I wrote honestly got thrown away. Because I was desperate and terrified, and I thought if I could just get here, if I could just meet you face to face, you'd see." "See what?" "That we're worth something. That we work hard. That we don't eat much, and we don't complain, and we'd earn our keep somehow. I'd clean your house and cook your meals and never ask for anything except a roof over their heads." Silas stood up abruptly. Clara flinched. Here it comes, she thought. Here's where he throws us out. But Silas just walked to the window, stood there looking out at the snow. 6 bedrooms, he said quietly. I built 6 bedrooms in a house for one man. You know what folks in town call me? The fool on the hill. The crazy brunette who builds rooms nobody'll ever sleep in. Clara didn't speak. My mother died when I was young. My father was cavalry, gone more than he was home. I raised myself mostly. And I swore that when I had a family, if I had a family, there'd be room for everyone. Nobody would ever feel like they didn't belong. He turned around. You lied to me. That ain't nothing. That matters. I know. But I've been lied to by better people than you, and their lies were for worse reasons. He walked back to the table. You lied because you wanted to save your children. I can understand that. What are you saying? I'm saying you stay through winter, like I said, and we see how things go. But I got conditions. Clara straightened. Name them. Ezra. Silas turned to the boy. You don't trust me. I get it. I wouldn't trust me either if I were you. But if you're living under my roof, you work under my command. You do what I say when I say it. Not because I'm better than you. Because that's how a ranch runs. You understand? Ezra's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Ruth, you're gonna stop acting like a grown woman. You're 12. You're a child. You eat when the food's served, you sleep when it's bedtime, and you let your mother be the mother. Understood? Ruth's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded too. The rest of you. Silas looked at the twins, at Jonah, at Nell with her silent eyes. This is your home now, at least until spring. You got questions, you ask them. You got fears, you speak them. You don't gotta be invisible here. Anyone tells you different, you come find me. Jonah raised his hand like he was in school. Yeah. Can I sleep in one of the 6 bedrooms? Something shifted in Silas's face. Almost a smile, but not quite. Yeah, son. You can sleep in one of the 6 bedrooms. Jonah grinned. Nell tugged at Clara's sleeve. Clara bent down, and Nell whispered something in her ear. Clara's face crumpled. What? Silas asked. Clara looked at him with fresh tears. She wants to know if you're going to stay, if you're going to be here in the morning. Every man she's ever known has left. Silas crouched down to Nell's level. The little girl watched him with those 2 old eyes. I built this house with my own hands, he said softly. Every nail, every board. I ain't going nowhere. This is my home, and for now it's yours too. You understand? Nell studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded, and for the first time since they'd arrived, she let go of her doll long enough to reach out and touch Silas's hand. Just briefly. Just to see if he was real. Silas let her. Clara watched her daughter's small fingers against this stranger's calloused palm, and she felt that dangerous hope flare brighter. Maybe she'd been wrong about everything. Maybe she'd been wrong about men, about mercy, about second chances. Maybe, just maybe, 20 letters and 1 answer had led her exactly where she was supposed to be. Only time would tell. But tonight her children were warm. Her children were fed. Her children were in a house with 6 bedrooms and a man who'd built them for a family that hadn't existed until now. It wasn't much. But it was more than she'd had in years, and Clara Whitmore had learned to survive on less. The first week passed in cautious circles. Clara learned the rhythms of Silas's house. When he woke before dawn always. When he returned from the barn after the children had eaten breakfast. When he spoke rarely, and only when words were necessary. She learned other things too. The way he carved wooden animals by the fire each night, his hands never still. The way he checked the locks on every door before bed. The way he watched her children with an expression she couldn't name. Not resentment, not regret. Something else entirely. Mama! Clara looked up from the shirt she was mending. Ruth stood in the kitchen doorway, baby Miriam balanced on her hip. What is it? Ezra's gone. Clara's needle stopped. What do you mean gone? He wasn't in his bed this morning. I thought maybe he was with Mr. Silas, but... Clara was already moving. She pushed past Ruth through the main room out onto the porch. The cold hit her like a slap. Ezra. No answer. Just wind and snow and silence. Ezra. The barn door stood open. Clara ran. Her feet slipped on ice, but she didn't slow down. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Not again. Please God, not again. She burst through the barn door and stopped. Ezra stood in the center aisle, a pitchfork in his hands. Hay scattered around his feet. His face was red with cold and exertion. Silas stood 3 feet away, arms crossed. "What's going on?" Clara demanded. Neither of them answered. "Ezra, what are you doing?" Her son's jaw tightened. "Working?" "It's barely dawn. You didn't tell anyone where you were going. Your sister thought, I ain't a baby mama. I don't need permission to do chores." "You scared Ruth half to death. You scared me." Ezra's grip tightened on the pitchfork. "I was trying to help, trying to earn our keep. Ain't that what you always said? We gotta earn our keep." Clara opened her mouth, closed it. Silas moved, 1 step forward, putting himself between mother and son. "Boy's been out here since 4, he said quietly. "Fed all the horses, mucked 3 stalls, did more work before breakfast than most hired hands do all day." Clara stared at him. "You knew he was here?" "Found him when I came out at 5. "And you didn't think to tell me?" "Figured a man's got a right to prove himself." Silas turned to Ezra. "But your mama's right about one thing. You scared your family. That ain't fair to them." Ezra's face crumpled for just a second, then hardened again. "I was trying to make sure you don't throw us out." The words hung in the cold air. Clara felt her heart crack. Her 10-year-old son working in the dark, terrified that hard work was the only thing standing between his family and the snow. "Son." Silas crouched down, not touching but close. "I told you, you're here through winter. That ain't changing." "Words are easy." "They are. That's why I don't use many." Silas met Ezra's eyes. "You want to work fine. We work together. Daylight hours. You tell your mama where you're going. And you eat breakfast before you start. Deal." Ezra studied him, searching for the lie. "Why? Why what? Why do you care if I eat breakfast?" Silas was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Because I was you once, working before dawn, trying to be enough, trying to make someone stay." He stood up. "Nobody made me eat breakfast either. I grew up hungry and angry and alone. Don't want that for you." Ezra's pitchfork lowered slowly. "You really ain't gonna throw us out. Not today, not tomorrow, not when spring comes, unless you want to go." "What if we want to stay?" Silas looked at Clara. Something passed between them, a question without words. "Then we'll figure that out together," Silas said. Clara's eyes burned. She blinked rapidly. "Come inside," she said to Ezra. "Breakfast is ready." Her son hesitated. Then he set down the pitchfork and walked past her out into the snow. Clara started to follow. "Mrs. Whitmore." She stopped, turned. Silas hadn't moved. His face was unreadable in the dim barn light. "He's a good boy," Silas said. "Strong, loyal, scared out of his mind, but hiding it well." "I know. He reminds me of someone." "Who?" "Me." Silas picked up the pitchfork Ezra had abandoned. "At his age, I'd already decided all men were either cruel or useless. Took me 20 years to learn different. Don't let it take him that long." Clara nodded slowly. "Thank you for not sending him back to bed, for letting him work. Man needs to feel useful, even a young one." She left him there, standing in the barn with his horses and his silence. But something had shifted. Something small and significant. For the first time, she thought she might understand Silas Burnett. And that scared her more than anything. The twins got sick 3 days later. It started with Samuel, a cough that wouldn't quit. Then Solomon, identical in illness as in everything else. By nightfall, both boys were burning with fever. Clara didn't sleep. She moved between their beds, cool cloths, and prayers, and memories of every child she'd heard of who died from winter sickness. Every tiny coffin, every grief-broken mother. "Mama!" Ruth appeared at midnight. "Let me take over. You need to rest." "I'm fine." "You're shaking." Clara looked at her hands. Ruth was right. They trembled like leaves. "I can't lose them." The words came out broken. "Ruth, I can't." "You won't." "You don't know that. Nobody knows that. Your father said the same thing about baby Michael, and then—" She stopped, pressed her hand to her mouth. Ruth's face went pale. "Mama, Michael was different. He was born too early. The twins are strong. They're 5 years old, and they've never had enough to eat, and—" "What's wrong?" Silas's voice came from the doorway. Clara hadn't heard him approach. "The twins," Ruth said quickly. "They've got fever." Silas crossed the room in 3 strides. He touched Samuel's forehead, then Solomon's. His face darkened. "This ain't just a cold." Clara's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I've seen this before. Winter sickness. It moves fast." He straightened. "There's a doctor in town. Doc Josiah. I'm going to get him." "It's the middle of the night. There's a blizzard." "I know what's out there." "You could die." Silas was already pulling on his coat. "So could they if we wait till morning." Silas. "Stay with them. Keep them cool. Ruth, boil water and find clean cloths. I'll be back before dawn." He was gone before Clara could argue. She stood in the middle of the room, her sick children whimpering, her daughter already moving toward the kitchen, and something in her chest that felt terrifyingly like faith. He came back. 3 hours later, coated in snow, half frozen, with a black man in a heavy coat beside him. "Doc Josiah Crane," the man said, already moving toward the twins. "I'd shake your hand, ma'am, but I need to see these boys first." Clara stepped back. "Let him work." Silas stood by the door, melting snow pooling at his feet. Clara crossed to him. "You could have died out there." "Didn't." "That was foolish." "Probably." "Why did you—" "Because they're children." Silas's voice was rough with cold and something else. "Because no child should die for want of a doctor who lives 10 miles away. Because—" He stopped, shook his head. "Because I wanted to." Clara's hand found his. His fingers were like ice. "Thank you." He didn't answer, but his fingers tightened around hers, just briefly, just enough. "Ma'am?" Doc Josiah's voice broke the moment. "I need to speak with you." Clara let go of Silas's hand, crossed to where the doctor stood between the twins' beds. "What is it?" "It's serious, but it's treatable. I've seen worse pull through." He opened his bag and began pulling out bottles. "These herbs mixed with hot water every 4 hours. Keep them warm but not too warm, and I'll need to stay through the night. Maybe tomorrow too. Whatever you need." Doc Josiah looked at her then. Really looked. His eyes were kind in a weathered face. "You're the woman from back east. The one with the 7 children." Clara's spine stiffened. "Yes. Town's been talking about you." "I imagine they have." "Don't pay them any mind." Doc Josiah turned back to his patients. "Folks here got nothing better to do than gossip. Doesn't make them right." Clara blinked. She'd expected judgment, not this. "You've got good children," the doctor continued. "I can see it in how they look at you. And Silas there." He glanced toward the door. "I've known him since he was younger than your oldest. Never seen him ride through a blizzard for anyone. Not even himself." Clara didn't know what to say. "That tells me something," Doc Josiah said quietly. "Tells me maybe you're exactly where you're supposed to be." The twins survived. It took 4 days. 4 days of fear and prayer, and Silas appearing with firewood and food and quiet presence. 4 days of Ruth running herself ragged, and Ezra standing guard by his brother's door, and Nell singing for the first time since they'd arrived. "What's she singing?" Silas asked on the 3rd night. Clara listened. The tune was soft, half-remembered. A lullaby she'd sung when Nell was a baby. "I taught her that, years ago." Before, Clara stopped. Before what? Before she stopped talking. Silas was quiet. She saw something, back in Pennsylvania. Something no child should see. Clara's voice dropped. My husband. He was usually just cold, distant. But one night he came home drunker than usual, and he... She couldn't finish. He hurt you. It wasn't a question. Just once. Just that one time. But Nell saw. She stopped talking the next day. Hasn't spoken more than a few words since. Silas's jaw tightened. And now she's singing. She's been watching you. The way you treat Ezra. The way you handle the little ones. I think... Clara's voice caught. I think she's starting to believe not all men are like him. Were you? Was I what? Starting to believe? Clara met his eyes. They were gray and steady and searching. I don't know, she said honestly. I want to, but wanting isn't the same as believing. No, it isn't. Silas stood. But it's a start. He walked out, left her with her sleeping children and her broken daughter's song, and a feeling she couldn't name growing in her chest. Sunday came with sunshine and judgment. We should go to church, Clara said at breakfast. Silas's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. Church. The children need normalcy, community, and... She hesitated. And people need to see us. All of us. Together. They'll talk. They're already talking. Might as well give them something accurate to talk about. Silas studied her. That measuring look she was learning to recognize. You sure about this? No. Clara lifted her chin. But I'm done hiding. They rode to town in Silas's wagon. All 9 of them. Clara in front with Silas and Jonah. The others in the back bundled against the cold. Whisper Creek's church was small and white and already full when they arrived. The whispers started before they reached the door. 7 children. Can you imagine the nerve? Poor Silas, trapped by a liar. Look at those clothes, practically rags. Clara felt each word like a stone, but she kept walking, kept her head high. Silas helped her down from the wagon. His hand lingered on her arm. A silent message. I'm here. They walked into the church. Every head turned. Every eye followed them as they moved toward a pew near the middle. Not the back Clara refused to hide. Not the front she wasn't looking for confrontation. Just the middle, where families sat. They filed in. Ezra, Ruth, the twins. Nell, Jonah, Clara, with baby Miriam, and finally Silas, taking up an entire pew and then some. The minister, Reverend Whitfield, paused in his sermon. His eyes flickered to them, then away. As I was saying, he continued, the Lord calls us to welcome the stranger, to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked. Matthew 25 tells us. Reverend. A woman's voice cut through, sharp, carrying. Clara turned. Verna Holt stood in the back pew, wealthy widow, owner of the boarding house, town matriarch. Reverend, I believe we have some strangers in our midst who need to explain themselves before we continue. The church went silent. Mrs. Holt, the Reverend said carefully, this is a house of worship, and deception shouldn't be welcome in it. Verna moved forward. Her eyes locked on Clara. This woman lied her way into our community. She presented herself as a suitable bride for one of our respected citizens, and instead delivered herself and 7 children under false pretenses. Clara stood. Her legs shook but held. Mrs. Holt, I don't believe we've been introduced. We don't need introduction. Your reputation precedes you. Does it? Clara's voice was steady. She didn't know where the strength came from, but she grabbed it with both hands. And what reputation is that? That I'm a widow, I am. That I have 7 children, I do. That I came west looking for a better life, guilty as charged. Verna's eyes narrowed. You deceived an honest man. I did. Clara didn't look away. I wrote letters that weren't entirely truthful because truthful letters got thrown away. Because no one wants a widow with 7 children. Because I had a choice between honesty and watching my children starve. I chose them. I'll always choose them. Murmurs rippled through the congregation. That doesn't excuse. Verna started. She's told me the truth. Silas's voice cut through like a blade. He stood beside Clara, solid and immovable. She told me everything. First night she was here. Didn't try to hide it once she arrived. And you're just accepting it. Verna's voice dripped disbelief. I'm accepting her. All of them. Silas looked around the church. These children have been traveling for 3 weeks. They've been hungry and scared and cold. Their mother gave them every bite of food she had and nearly collapsed because of it. She lied in letters because it was the only way to save them. He turned to Verna. What would you have done? Verna's mouth opened. Closed. That's what I thought. Silas put his hand on Clara's back. Anyone else got something to say? Silence. Then I reckon we can get back to the sermon. Reverend Whitfield blinked, then smiled. Yes, as I was saying, the Lord calls us to welcome the stranger. Clara sat down. Her whole body trembled. Silas sat beside her close enough that their shoulders touched. Jonah climbed into Silas's lap without asking. Silas let him. And for the first time since she'd stepped off that train, Clara felt like maybe, just maybe, she'd found something worth keeping. The ride home was quiet. The children were subdued, processing what they'd witnessed. Even Jonah stayed still, sensing the weight in the air. Finally, Ruth spoke. Mr. Silas. Yeah. Why did you do that? Stand up for us like that. Silas was quiet for a long moment. The horse's hooves crunched through snow. Because it was right, he said finally. Because that woman had no cause to shame your mother in front of God and everyone. Because... He stopped. Because what? Ruth pressed. Silas glanced at Clara. Something unspoken passed between them. Because you're mine to protect now. That's what family does. Ruth's eyes went wide. Family. If you want to be. Clara's breath caught. In the back of the wagon, Nell began to sing again. That soft lullaby. But this time, Jonah joined in, humming along. Then, the twins. Then Ruth, her voice cracking with tears. Ezra didn't sing. But when Clara looked back, she saw something she'd never seen before. Her son was smiling. Small. Barely there. But real. And Silas saw it too. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara found Silas on the porch. He stood looking out at the snow, breath misting in the cold air. Thank you, she said. You already thanked me. I'm thanking you again. She moved to stand beside him. What you said, in church, about family. I meant it. I know you did. That's what scares me. Silas turned to look at her. Scares you? I've been on my own for so long, taking care of everything myself. The idea of someone else... She couldn't finish. The idea of trusting someone. Yes. Silas nodded slowly. I understand that. Spent my whole life trusting nobody but myself. Easier that way. Is it safer anyway? He looked back at the snow. But safe gets lonely. I built a house with 6 bedrooms and slept in it alone for 3 years. Safe and lonely. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Any of it. Let someone in. Stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. Believe that maybe... Her voice broke. Silas's hand found hers, warm despite the cold. I don't know how either, he said, but I figure we could not know together, if you're willing. Clara looked at their joined hands, at this man who'd ridden through a blizzard for her children, who'd stood up to the town for her, who'd built 6 bedrooms for a family he'd only dreamed of. I'm willing, she whispered. Silas squeezed her hand. They stood together in the cold watching the snow fall, and for the first time in longer than Clara could remember, she didn't feel alone. Clara woke to screaming. Not the children. Something else. Something outside. She was out of bed before her mind caught up, grabbing her shawl, running toward the sound. The main room was dark. Fire burned low. Silas wasn't there. The screaming came again, high, terrified. Horses. Clara threw open the front door and saw it. Fire. The barn was burning. Silas! She screamed his name into the smoke-filled darkness. Silas! Ezra appeared behind her, pulling on his coat. Mama, what? Get the children. Get them outside. Away from the house. But now, Ezra! He ran. Clara ran too, toward the flames, toward the screaming horses, toward the man she couldn't see. The heat hit her 20 feet from the barn, waves of it pushing her back. Smoke filled her lungs. Silas! A figure emerged from the inferno, leading 2 horses coughing, stumbling. Silas. He shoved the horses' leads into her hands and turned back toward the barn. There's more inside. You can't. But he was already gone, swallowed by smoke and flame. Clara stood frozen. The horses pulled against her grip, wild with terror. Behind her, she heard Ruth gathering the children, heard Jonah crying, heard Ezra shouting orders like a soldier. Seconds passed. 10. 20. The barn roof groaned. Silas. Nothing. Clara tied the horses to the porch rail and ran toward the barn door. The heat was unbearable. Her eyes streamed. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Silas, please. He burst through the smoke, another horse behind him, his coat on fire. Clara grabbed the horse blanket from the porch and threw herself at him, beating out the flames, screaming words she couldn't hear over the roar. They fell together in the snow. Silas gasping, coughing, alive. You fool! Clara was sobbing, hitting his chest. You absolute fool! You could have died. Had to save them. You could have died. Silas grabbed her wrists, held them still. I'm here. I'm all right. Behind them, the barn collapsed. Timber and flame and everything Silas had built crashing down. Clara stared at the destruction. Months of work, years of building, gone in minutes. The horses, she whispered. Did you? Got 4 out, lost 2. 2 horses dead, 2 lives gone because... How did it start? Silas's face hardened. Didn't start on its own. Clara's blood went cold. What do you mean? I mean I smelled kerosene before I smelled smoke. Someone had done this, deliberately. Someone had tried to burn down everything Silas owned. Who would? I got a good idea. He stood, pulled Clara up with him. His face was black with soot. His hands blistered, his eyes burning with something darker than fire. Stay with the children. I'm going to town. Silas, wait. Don't argue with me. Not now. At least let Doc Josiah look at your hands. My hands can wait. He grabbed what was left of his coat. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me. He was on a horse before Clara could stop him, riding hard toward Whisper Creek, leaving her with 7 children and a burning barn, and fear like ice in her veins. Silas returned at dawn. Clara hadn't slept. She'd kept the children close, kept the rifle Silas had shown her loaded and ready, kept watching the road. When she heard hoofbeats, she raised the gun. It's me. She lowered it. Her hands shook. Silas dismounted slowly. He looked worse than when he'd left, exhausted, hollow. What happened? Who did this? He walked past her into the house. The children were asleep in the main room, huddled together. He looked at them for a long moment. Silas? Harrison Wells. Clara's stomach dropped. Eleanor's father. Paid a ranch hand $50 to set the fire. Man confessed to the sheriff an hour ago. But why? Because you ended the engagement. Silas laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. Because I chose you. Because I chose a lying widow with 7 children over his precious daughter. Because he couldn't stand being rejected by a fool like me. Clara's legs gave out. She sank into a chair. This is my fault. No. If I hadn't come here, then I'd still be alone in a house with 6 empty bedrooms, and Harrison Wells would still be the same bitter man he's always been. This ain't your fault. It's his. And he's gonna answer for it. What do you mean? Sheriff's got him in custody. He'll face a judge. Clara closed her eyes. And Eleanor left town an hour ago, heading back east to family. Silas sat down across from her. She came to me before she left, asked if I was happy with my choice. What did you tell her? Told her I'd never been happier in my life. Clara's eyes opened, met his. You said that? Meant it too. He reached across the table, took her hand. Barn can be rebuilt, horses can be replaced. You and these children? His voice cracked. You can't be replaced. I'd let him burn everything I own before I let him touch any of you. Clara was crying. She didn't try to stop it. I love you, she whispered. The words hung in the air. First time she'd said them. First time she'd admitted what had been growing for weeks. Silas stood, came around the table, pulled her to her feet. Say it again. I love you. He kissed her. Gentle at first, then deeper. His hands cupped her face like she was something precious. When they finally broke apart, Clara was trembling. I was scared, Silas said quietly. When I saw the fire, when I thought about you and the children in the house, I was more scared than I've ever been in my life. Because of the barn? Because of you. Because I realized I'd burn every barn in Montana if it meant keeping you safe. Clara leaned into him. Let him hold her. Behind them, a small voice spoke. Mama. They turned. Nell stood in the doorway, her doll clutched to her chest, her eyes wide. Is the bad part over? Clara knelt down, opened her arms. Nell ran to her, buried her face in Clara's shoulder. Yes, baby, the bad part is over. Promise. Clara looked at Silas. At this man who'd ridden through fire for her children, who'd stood against the town for her, who'd built 6 bedrooms for a family he'd only dreamed of. I promise. The days after the fire moved slowly. The community responded in ways Clara hadn't expected. Doc Josiah arrived the morning after with medicine for Silas's burned hands. Reverend Whitfield came with food. Even some of the women who'd whispered in church brought blankets, clothes supplies. Verna Holt came too. Clara saw her wagon approaching and felt her spine stiffen. She waited on the porch, Ezra beside her. Mrs. Whitmore. Verna climbed down slowly. She looked older than before, smaller. Mrs. Holt. I came to apologize. Clara blinked. Whatever she'd expected, it wasn't that. Harrison Wells was my cousin, Verna continued. By marriage. I knew he was angry about Eleanor. I didn't know he was capable of... She stopped, took a breath. I should have spoken against him sooner, should have seen what kind of man he really was. He fooled a lot of people. He did, but that doesn't excuse what I said in church, what I did to you. Clara was quiet. Ezra shifted beside her, ready to defend. I lost a son, Verna said softly. 20 years ago, typhoid fever. He would have been about Mr. Burnett's age now. Clara's anger faltered. I looked at you with all your children and I felt... Verna's voice broke. I felt cheated. By God. By life. It wasn't fair of me to take that out on you. No, it wasn't. I know. Verna pulled something from her wagon. A basket covered with cloth. This is just food. It's not forgiveness. I know I haven't earned that. But it's a start. if you'll let it be." Clara looked at the basket, at the woman holding it, at all the complicated mess of human pain and jealousy and regret. "A start," Clara said finally. "We can try that." Verna nodded, set the basket on the porch, turned to leave. "Mrs. Holt." She stopped. "I'm sorry about your son." For a moment, Verna's careful composure cracked. Clara saw the grief underneath raw and old, and never fully healed. "Thank you," Verna whispered, and left. Ezra waited until the wagon was out of sight. "You forgave her?" "No, but I gave her a chance to earn it. There's a difference." "Is there?" Clara looked at her son. This boy who'd been so angry, so guarded, so afraid. "There is, and someday someone's going to need you to give them the same chance. Remember how hard it was for her to ask." Ezra was quiet, thinking. Then, "Mama, I think I understand now. Why you lied in those letters." Clara's heart clenched. "You do? You did it for us, to save us, same as Silas ran into the fire for his horses. Sometimes you do wrong things for right reasons." "That's exactly right." Ezra nodded, went back inside. Clara watched him go. Her 10-year-old son, growing up too fast, but maybe finally growing into something other than fear. Silas proposed 2 weeks later. Not with flowers or fancy words. That wasn't his way. He found Clara in what remained of the barn she'd been sorting through salvage looking for anything that survived the fire. His hands were healing pink new skin where the burns had been. "Marry me." Clara dropped the harness she'd been holding. "What? You heard me? That's not how you ask someone to marry you." Silas frowned. "It isn't." "No, there's usually, I don't know, some kind of speech, getting down on one knee, asking if I want to." "Do you want to?" Clara stared at him. This impossible, stubborn, infuriating man. "Yes." "Then why do I need a speech?" She started laughing. Couldn't help it. The absurdity of it all, the burned barn, the scattered harness, the soot still staining everything. "Because it's romantic, Silas." "I ain't romantic." "I know. But I love you, and I love your children, and I want to spend the rest of my life with all of you in that house with 6 bedrooms that finally ain't empty anymore." Clara stopped laughing. "That's a speech," she said softly. "Is it? A good one." Silas stepped closer, took her hands in his healing ones. "So will you?" "Will I what?" "Marry me." "Stop making me say it again." Clara smiled, rose on her toes, kissed him softly. "Yes, Silas Burnett, I'll marry you." "Good." He pulled her close. "Now let's go tell the children before Jonah decides on his own that I'm his papa and announces it to the whole town." "Too late. He already did, last Sunday at church." Silas groaned. Clara laughed. And for the first time in years, the sound came easy. They told the children that evening, gathered them in the main room, all 7 faces curious and anxious. "We have something to tell you," Clara began. "You're getting married," Ruth said. Clara blinked. "How did you—" "Mama, it's obvious. The way you look at each other, the way he proposed in the barn." "You heard that?" "I wasn't listening on purpose. I was looking for the salvaged bridles." Silas made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Well," Clara said, "yes, we're getting married." The twins cheered. Jonah launched himself at Silas, nearly knocking him over. Ruth smiled, really smiled the way she used to before everything went wrong. Nell walked quietly to Silas, stood in front of him. "Will you be our papa?" Silas knelt down, met her eyes. "If you want me to be." Nell considered this. Then, "You saved the horses, even though there was fire. You ran into the fire for them." "I did." "Would you do that for us, Nell? I need to know." Her voice was fierce despite its softness. "Would you run into fire for us?" Silas took her small hand in his. "Yes, for any of you. For all of you. I'd run through fire flood and hell itself. Nell studied his face, looking for lies, finding none. Okay, she said finally. You can be our papa. And she hugged him. Silas's arms came around her slowly, carefully, like he was holding something that might break. Clara watched with tears streaming down her face. Only Ezra hung back. Son. Silas looked up, still holding Nell. You got something to say? Ezra's jaw was tight, his fists clenched. You gonna be different? Different how? Different from... He stopped, started again. My real papa. He wasn't much good. I remember. The drinking, the yelling, the way Mama cried at night thinking we couldn't hear. Clara's heart shattered. Ezra, I need to know. He sounded so young, so scared. I need to know you're gonna be different. Because if you're not, if you hurt her, if you hurt any of them. Silas set Nell down gently, walked to Ezra. They stood face to face, man and boy. I ain't perfect, Silas said. I'm gonna make mistakes, gonna say wrong things sometimes, gonna work too long and forget to be soft when soft is what's needed. Ezra didn't move. But I don't drink, never have, don't see the point of it. I don't yell, don't hit, don't believe in breaking things that can be fixed with patience. Words, Ezra said. Those are just words. You're right, they are. Silas held out his hand. So here's what we're gonna do. You watch me, every day. And if you ever see me do something that scares you or hurts your mama or threatens your brothers and sisters, you come to me, and we'll deal with it, man to man. Ezra looked at the offered hand. What if I can't stop you? Then you go to Doc Josiah, or the Reverend, or the Sheriff. But I'm telling you now, son, you won't need to. Because I've spent my whole life becoming a different kind of man than my father was. And I ain't about to waste all that work now. Slowly, carefully, Ezra took his hand. They shook. Firm. Real. I'll be watching, Ezra said. I'm counting on it. And just like that, they became a family. Not perfect. Not easy. Not without fear or doubt or old wounds still healing. But real. And that was enough. The wedding was set for December 20th. Clara didn't want anything fancy. A simple ceremony in the church with Reverend Whitfield presiding. The children standing with them. Doc Josiah as witness. But the town had other ideas. Word spread fast. The mail-order bride who'd arrived with 7 children. The rancher who'd chosen her anyway. The fire. The arrest. The love story growing from ashes. People started showing up days before the wedding. They brought food, helped rebuild the barn, offered animals to replace those lost. The same people who'd whispered and judged now worked side by side with Clara's children. I don't understand, Clara said to Silas the night before the wedding. Understand what? They hated us. Now they're helping. Why? Silas was quiet for a moment. They didn't hate you. They feared you. Feared me. You represented something scary. Change. Someone who didn't follow the rules. Someone who lied to get what she needed. He pulled her close. But then they saw what that lie created. A family. A home. Something real. And they remembered that they're not so different. That they've all done hard things for good reasons. So they forgive me. They understand you. That's better than forgiveness. Clara leaned into him. Let herself be held. Tomorrow she would stand in that church and promise forever to a man she'd known for 2 months. Tomorrow her children would gain a father. Tomorrow everything would change again. But tonight she was just Clara, just a woman who'd survived, just someone who'd taken a chance and somehow miraculously won. I love you, she whispered. I know. Is that all you have to say? No. Silas tilted her chin up, looked into her eyes. I love you too, more than I knew I could love anything. And tomorrow in front of God and everyone I'm going to promise you forever, and I'm going to mean every word. Clara smiled. That was almost romantic. Don't tell anyone. I've got a reputation to maintain. She laughed. He kissed her. And outside the snow fell soft and white, covering Whisper Creek, in silence and peace. December 20th arrived wrapped in morning frost and silence. Clara stood before the small mirror in her bedroom, her hands trembling so badly she couldn't fasten the buttons on her dress. The same blue dress Silas had bought for her arrival, the one she'd never worn because she'd been too thin, too scared, too uncertain. It fit now. Perfectly. Mama. Ruth appeared in the doorway, baby Miriam on her hip. At 12, Ruth had aged 10 years in the past 2 months, but today her face held something Clara hadn't seen in far too long. Hope. You look beautiful, Ruth whispered. Clara's eyes filled. I'm terrified. I know. Ruth set Miriam down and crossed to her mother. Her young hands took over the buttons steady where Clara's shook. But that's okay. Being scared doesn't mean you're wrong. Sometimes it means you're finally doing something right. When did you get so wise? I learned from watching you. Ruth finished the last button, stepped back. There. Perfect. Clara turned to the mirror. The woman staring back was someone she barely recognized. Not the hollow-eyed widow who'd collapsed on a train platform 2 months ago. Not the desperate mother who'd lied in letters to save her children. Someone new, someone stronger, someone loved. Mama, Nell's small voice came from the hallway. Everyone's waiting. Clara took a breath, squared her shoulders. Then let's not keep them waiting any longer. The church was full. Clara hadn't expected that. She'd imagined a handful of people, Doc Josiah, Reverend Whitfield, maybe a few curious neighbors. Instead, every pew was packed. Faces she recognized from town. Faces she didn't. All of them watching as she walked through the door with her children arranged around her like a shield. Ezra walked on her left, serious and protective. Ruth walked on her right, carrying Miriam. Behind them came Nell holding the twins' hands and Jonah bouncing with barely contained excitement. But Clara only had eyes for the man standing at the altar. Silas Burnett. In a clean shirt and his best coat. His dark hair combed. His gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. The walk down the aisle felt endless. Each step carried the weight of everything that had brought them here. The lies, the fear, the fire, the forgiveness. Clara felt every eye on her, heard the whispered comments, felt the judgment and the curiosity, and something else too. Admiration. These people who had doubted her, who had called her a liar and a deceiver, now watched her walk toward forever, with something approaching respect. She reached the altar. Silas took her hand. You came, he said softly. Did you think I wouldn't? I think I've learned not to expect anything, but to be grateful for everything. Reverend Whitfield cleared his throat. Shall we begin? The ceremony was simple, traditional, words that had been spoken in churches across the territory for generations. But when Reverend Whitfield asked if anyone objected, Clara's heart stopped. Silence stretched. 1 second. 2. 5. Then a voice from the back. I got something to say. Clara turned. Her blood ran cold. A woman stood in the doorway. Older, severe, dressed in expensive black traveling clothes. Clara knew that face. Knew it from years of judgment and cruelty and thinly veiled threats. Margaret Whitmore, her mother-in-law. No, Clara breathed. No, no, no. Margaret walked down the aisle slowly. Her eyes swept over the children, counting them like possessions. These are my grandchildren, she announced. And this woman, she pointed at Clara, kidnapped them from their rightful home. The church erupted. Voices overlapped, gasps and murmurs and shock. Clara felt the room spinning, felt her children pressing closer, felt everything she'd built beginning to crack. That's a lie. Silas's voice cut through the chaos. Calm, deadly. Mrs. Whitmore came here legally, with her children. running from a woman who threatened to take them away. Threatened? Margaret laughed. I offered to raise them properly, to give them advantages their mother couldn't provide, and she fled in the night like a criminal. Because you were going to steal them. Clara found her voice. You told me yourself. You said I was unfit. You said you'd have a judge declare me incompetent. You said, I said what any concerned grandmother would say when she sees her grandchildren being raised in poverty by a woman who can't provide for them. They're not your children. They carry my son's blood. That makes them mine. Silas stepped forward, put himself between Margaret and Clara. Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but I know these children belong with their mother, and as of today, they belong with me too. Whatever claim you think you have, it ends here. Margaret's eyes narrowed. And who are you? Silas Burnett, Clara's husband. In about 5 minutes if you'll kindly step aside. Husband, Margaret laughed. She's been here 2 months. You barely know her. I know enough. You know she lied to you, that she deceived you into taking her and 7 children you never asked for. I know everything, and I chose her anyway. The church had gone silent, every breath held, every eye fixed on the confrontation at the altar. Margaret smiled. Cold, calculating. I have papers. Legal documents signed by a judge in Pennsylvania declaring Clara Whitmore an unfit mother. Those children should be in my custody. Clara's knees buckled. Silas caught her. Those papers, a voice said from the congregation, aren't worth the ink they're printed on. Doc Josiah stood. His dark face was calm, but his eyes blazed. I've been practicing medicine for 35 years. I've seen unfit mothers. I've seen children who've been neglected, abused, abandoned. Those children, he pointed at Clara's 7, are the most loved, most protected, most cared for children I've ever examined. Whatever your judge in Pennsylvania thought he was wrong. Who are you to? I'm a doctor, and a citizen, and a man who knows the law better than most. Doc Josiah stepped into the aisle. I'm also someone who was once declared unfit by people who looked at my skin instead of my character. I know exactly what you're doing, Mrs. Whitmore, and I won't let you do it here. Margaret's composure cracked. This is outrageous. What's outrageous? Verna Holt's voice rang out as she stood. Is barging into a wedding to terrorize a woman and her children. Whatever your papers say, you have no authority in Montana territory. I'll appeal to the territorial judge. Judge Harrison. A man's voice now. Clara didn't recognize him. I am Judge Harrison. I came today to witness this wedding because Silas Burnett is the finest man I know. And I can tell you right now, Mrs. Whitmore, that no court in this territory will separate these children from their mother. Margaret's face went white. You can't. I can, and I will. The judge moved toward her. I suggest you leave. Now, before I have the sheriff escort you out. For a long moment, Margaret didn't move. Her eyes swept the church, all these people standing against her, standing for Clara. Then her gaze landed on Ezra. Boy, your father would be ashamed of you, living with strangers, forgetting your real family. Ezra stepped forward. Clara tried to grab him, but he slipped past. My father, Ezra said, his voice steady, was a drunk who never once told me he was proud of me. Silas Burnett has been more of a father in 2 months than my real father was in 10 years. Margaret flinched. These are my brothers and sisters. Ezra gestured to the others. That's my mother. And that, he pointed at Silas, is my papa, the one I chose, the one who chose us. And you can't have any of us. Ruth stood next. I'm staying with my mother. The twins stood together. Us too. Nell's small voice. I have a papa now. I don't need a grandmother who doesn't love me. And Jonah, precious Jonah, who didn't fully understand, but understood enough. Go away, mean lady. You're ruining the wedding." Laughter rippled through the church. Tension broke like a fever. Margaret stood alone in the aisle, surrounded by people who saw through her, rejected by the very children she'd come to claim. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Yes." Clara stepped forward, Silas beside her. "It is. You've lost. Go home, Margaret, and don't come back." For a moment, Margaret seemed ready to fight. Then something in her crumbled. The certainty, the righteousness, the conviction that she was owed these children. She turned and walked out without another word. The church doors closed behind her, and Clara collapsed into Silas's arms, sobbing with relief. Reverend Whitfield waited until the tears subsided. "Now then," he said gently, "I believe we have a wedding to complete." Clara laughed through her tears. "Yes, please, before anything else happens." The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. Clara heard the words, said her vows, felt Silas slide a simple gold band onto her finger where he'd gotten it she didn't know and didn't care. "I now pronounce you man and wife." Reverend Whitfield smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Silas kissed her, tender and fierce and full of promise. The church erupted in cheers. The children swarmed them, Jonah climbing Silas like a tree, Nell pressing close to Clara, the twins bouncing with excitement, Ruth crying, happy tears, Ezra standing back but smiling. "We're a family now," Jonah announced to everyone. "A real family." "We always were," Clara said, touching his cheek. "Now it's just official." They walked out of the church together, all 9 of them, into cold December sunshine and a future none of them could have imagined. The celebration at the house lasted until nightfall. People came and went. Food appeared. Music played. Someone had brought a fiddle. The children danced with neighbors who'd once whispered about them. Silas accepted congratulations from men who'd doubted him. Clara stood by the window watching it all. "You all right?" Doc Josiah appeared beside her, a cup of cider in his weathered hand. "I'm overwhelmed." "That's understandable. You've had quite a day." "Margaret?" "Won't be back. Judge Harrison made sure of that. Sent a telegram to Pennsylvania while you were saying your vows. Her papers are worthless here." Clara's legs went weak. "Truly, truly, your children are safe, Clara, legally and completely." She started crying again. Doc Josiah patted her shoulder awkwardly. "Seems like you've done a lot of that today." Happy tears. "Best kind." Silas found her an hour later after the last guests had left. The children were scattered through the house, Ruth putting the little ones to bed, Ezra helping clean up Nell, already asleep in her new room. "Wife." Clara turned. Silas stood in the doorway, his coat off, his sleeves rolled up. "Husband." Still sounds strange. Good strange or bad strange? The best strange. He crossed to her, pulled her close. "I didn't think today would end this way." "What did you think?" "I thought Margaret would win. I thought we'd lose everything." "But we didn't." "No." Silas pressed his forehead to hers. "We didn't. Because you fought for your children, and they fought for you. And somehow this whole town decided to fight for all of us. I still don't understand that part." "I do." Silas pulled back to look at her. They saw something worth protecting. Not just you, not just the children, but what we built, what we proved. What did we prove? That family isn't about blood. It's about choice, about showing up, about loving each other even when it's hard. He smiled. They want to believe that's possible. We showed them it is. Clara leaned into him. Let the weight of the day finally settle. What happens now? Now we build. The barn's almost finished. Spring will bring new horses. The children will grow. We'll have good years and hard years and everything in between. That's all. That's everything. Silas kissed her forehead. That's a whole life, Clara. A real one. The kind neither of us thought we'd ever have. She closed her eyes, breathed him in. A real life. A whole family. A future built from ashes and letters and impossible hope. She'd take it, every single day of it. Christmas came 5 days later. Clara woke to children's laughter and the smell of something burning. She found Silas in the kitchen covered in flour, attempting pancakes, while Jonah helped by dropping eggshells into the batter. "You're supposed to be sleeping," Silas said. "You're supposed to be cooking. Those are two different skills." He looked at the smoking pan. "Notice that?" Clara laughed and rescued the breakfast. The children appeared one by one, drawn by noise and smell. They ate together at the big table. 9 of them now. The 6 bedrooms finally full, Ezra in one, Ruth and Nell sharing another, the twins in a third baby, Miriam in the 4th, Clara and Silas in the master. The 6th bedroom stayed empty, waiting for whatever came next. After breakfast, presents appeared. Simple things, practical things. A new doll for Nell, a rope for Ezra, books for Ruth, carved animals for the twins, a rattle for Miriam, and for Jonah, a wooden horse so detailed it looked almost alive. "You made these," Clara said to Silas. "All of them. Had time, while you were all sleeping." "When did you sleep?" "I didn't." He shrugged. "Worth it." Clara kissed him. Right there in front of all the children. "Gross," Ezra muttered. But he was smiling. The day stretched long and sweet. They ate too much, laughed too loud, told stories by the fire while snow fell outside. And when evening came, Clara found herself in the 6th bedroom. Empty, quiet, waiting. Silas appeared behind her. "You all right?" "I'm thinking." "About what?" Clara touched her stomach. It was too soon to know for certain, too soon to speak it aloud. But something felt different, something new. "About the future," she said, "about what this room might become." Silas was quiet for a moment. Then his hand covered hers. "Whatever it becomes," he said softly, "we'll face it together." Clara turned to him. This man who'd taken 7 strangers into his home, who'd ridden through fire, who'd stood against a whole church full of doubt, who'd loved her even when she'd given him every reason not to. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. "You deserve everything." Silas pulled her close. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it." They stood together in the empty room. Behind them the children were singing Ruth, leading the others, following voices young and old, blending into something beautiful. Outside, Montana stretched vast and white under winter stars. Inside, a house built for loneliness finally held what it was meant to hold. Love, family, home. Not the family Silas had expected. Not the life Clara had planned. Something better. Something real. Something built from broken pieces and desperate hope. And the choice made daily, made deliberately to keep showing up. Clara Whitmore Burnett had arrived in Whisper Creek with 7 children and a handful of lies. She stayed with 8 reasons to live and a truth bigger than anything she'd ever imagined. Some people spent their whole lives searching for where they belonged. Clara had found it in a letter, a train ride, and a man who built 6 bedrooms for a family that hadn't existed until she walked through his door. The end wasn't really an end. It was a beginning, the first page of a story that would write itself across years and seasons and generations. But that first page, the one that started with a lie and ended with love, that page was complete. And it was exactly as it should be. That night, after the children slept and the fire burned low, Silas took Clara's hand and led her to the porch. They stood together under a sky so full of stars it seemed impossible. "I want to tell you something," Silas said. "What?" "I used to pray, every night, For God to send me a family. I asked for a wife and children and a reason to keep building this place. He paused. I stopped asking 3 years ago. Decided God wasn't listening. Clara squeezed his hand. Then you showed up, on a train platform, with 7 children I didn't know existed. And I realized God was listening the whole time. He just had bigger plans than I knew how to imagine. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Happy tears, grateful tears. I didn't believe in second chances, she said. I thought my life was over, that I'd spend the rest of it just surviving, just keeping my children alive. I never thought I'd find... She gestured at everything. The house, the land, the man beside her. This. Neither did I. They stood in silence, breath misting in the cold. Then Jonah's voice came from inside. Mama, Papa, it's snowing again. Clara laughed, wiped her eyes. Duty calls. Always does. Silas kissed her forehead. Ready. For what? For everything. For the rest of our lives. For whatever comes next. Clara looked at him. At this man who'd become her husband, her partner, her home. Ready, she said. They went inside together to their children, to their family, to the life they'd built from nothing but hope. And the door closed behind them, shutting out the cold, holding in the warmth. A house once empty, now full beyond measure. A man once alone, now surrounded by love. A woman once desperate, now finally beautifully home. This was their story, their beginning, their forever. And it started with a lie survived through fire, and ended with the only truth that ever mattered. Family is not about blood. Family is about choice. Family is about showing up day after day and loving each other through everything. Clara Whitmore had chosen well, and she would keep choosing every single day for the rest of her life. That was the end, and the beginning, and everything in between. That was home.